You know, I've been thinking about standing alone for God, and there is such an example in Scripture that gives me a warning. This is not a good example; it's a negative example, but it's such a warning that I think it's a really good lesson, and it comes in the life of a man by the name of Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat was one of the kings of Judah, and he was a man who loved the Lord, and he stood firm for God, and he did all the things that you hope that the king will do in terms of tearing down the idols and turning his people to God. In fact, he had so many reforms and so many things that were really good that we'd have to call him one of the good kings, one of the kings that we would want to emulate. However, at one point in his life, he allied himself with the king of Israel, Ahab, who was obviously not a believer. He was a pagan god of the northern kingdom, and so Jehoshaphat allied himself with this king, and he entered into war with him against an enemy. And you might not think that was such a big deal, but it became a very dangerous time for Jehoshaphat in his own life, and he really only came out of it by the grace of God. He could have easily been killed in the battle. He was a target, but he came through it by the grace of God. And after that particular instance, then he returned to the Lord in greater faith, and there were many more things in his life after that were good. And you might think, well, it sounds like a good ending. But the ultimate fruit of this man's life was seen in the life of his own son, because during this time of this alliance with this evil king of Israel, his son married a daughter of King Ahab. And this son married to this young woman who was a completely different background, turned into a terrible, evil king, and undid all the good that his father's life had done. And I think about people today and how there are so many Christian people who want to live a life for the Lord and are doing the right things. But it's so tempting sometimes to join in with and not have to live alone. And I talked with one pastor about this once, and he spoke of the loneliness that comes in being a pastor, especially in social settings, because there are people that don't want to sit down and have dinner with the pastor because they have to watch their language, or they have to mitigate their behavior in some way. And so sometimes a pastor's life can be kind of a lonely life. And it might be tempting for that man to join in with those who are different, and even join the lives of his family members to the lives of unbelievers. And so to stand alone and to not feel that we have to join the world in order to have a social life is very compelling when you think about the impact that it has on our children. And how do we stand alone for God and resist the impulse that the world will offer us, so that our children recognize that it isn't a wrong thing to live separately and to be different from the world, and to teach our children from the time they're young, you are different. You are not like the rest of the world. And so I think this is such an important thing for us to understand as Christians.